All right, everybody, we're here. Another Express Entry live Q&A, which for years, you guys, the EE Live Q&A drove the YouTube channel. And with so much focus that we had on Express Entry, it was natural to focus a lot of the Q&As and everything on that particular topic. And then over time, as I added more lawyers back into the mix and we started, really expanding our other offerings, then I started to see some value in doing a Canada Live Q&A, like a big one. And that covered all aspects of immigration. But as I've been thinking about it, where is Mark's heart? Where's my real passion? Where is the real ability that I have to influence and change the world? It's with Express Entry. And now that I have this character right here with the firm, Cedric, now we can literally help people no matter what stage of their Express Entry journey they're at. And I'm not talking about just helping people to prepare awesome Express Entry applications that they get right the first time. But I'm talking about sometimes when people listen to those all over the internet saying it's so easy, you can do it yourself. And then they book a consult with me. And that consult is basically an acknowledgement that they got their application rejected or there was a crazy misrepresentation finding. And at that stage, I was limited to what I could do until Mr. Cedric here, Marin, immigration lawyer extraordinaire, joined our firm. And now we have the ability to fully support people, including if there are mistakes made by IRCC and applications were rejected when they should not have been, reconsiderations at a whole new level, as well as judicial reviews, and actually fighting for people. So I am so grateful to have Cedric as a part of the firm. And I think you guys have probably seen some of his live Q&As. But wow, this is great. So Cedric, thanks for being here and thanks for being a part of the firm.
Yeah, my pleasure, Mark. I mean, we have a lot of resources in addition to the live Q&As, right, on our website, which we've been rolling out on judicial reviews and reconsideration and delete applications. So happy to contribute and help others.
You bet. And what Cedric is talking about here, I'm going to just do a quick little search and I'm going to flip back over here to our site. And let's see what we can pull up here. So you will see that there is a lot of different resources and tools that Cedric has been drafting and blog posts and just trying to educate people. And so watch as we go forward. If you go to our website and you go to blog, on the blog page, you can actually search for different topics, and all of our different blogs and the topics we've covered are all laid out in here. So make sure that you go back and check them out. But there's going to be a lot of things that we are, I'll give you a little bit of teaser that Cedric's going to be doing. And so pay attention, because if you find yourself in this situation or you know of somebody who's in a real bad situation, we're here to help in whatever way we can. And especially now with Cedric here, we have the ability to go through the whole process and help no matter what stage you find yourself. So that's kind of where we're at here as we get ready for this Express Entry Live. Armin, it's good to see you as always. And we've got people that are connected in on the Express Entry Law private Facebook group, which is this anonymous Facebook user. Please, what can I do to relocate to Canada? Well, stay tuned. Watch these videos. And there is a lot of different resources out there that we've put on our firm, including when you go to our website here and we click on Speak to a Lawyer and we scroll down here and you can see here is Cedric right here. You can book a consult. And Cedric can go through everything with respect to your history and your human capital and help you to strategize exactly the best options are for relocating to Canada, whether it's temporary or permanent. So, all right. Hello, Meet Shaw. Good to see you. We've got Arian, who is in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia. Oh, so you practice from both areas. Fantastic. Connecting in on LinkedIn. Arian, it's good to see you. Amit, good to see you as well down there connecting from Virginia. I don't know if any of these characters have joined you on your live, Cedric.
Not yet, no. Mine's a little bit earlier in the morning for the early birds. Yeah.
All right. Well, Armin's here extending a hello to you. And this is always the question of all questions. So why don't we just start with this, Cedric? So
I'm
Rex
gonna
EMR
say.
says,
Oh, go ahead. No,
what
no, sorry. Read the question.
yeah,
I'm so
what
eager.
do you guys predict, right? What do you guys predict will be the express entry draw scores for today? So what's your prediction? We'll slide over here and we'll pull up
I
the actual site so people can kind of see what we're looking at here. So 26th, so we're on track for another draw today. So what do you figure? 496 was the
say
last one.
493 is what I'm gonna say.
493. Okay. Okay, so Cedric says 493. So we can see 4,750. So let's go through the deductive process here. So we know that immediately before the draw on the 24th, and this was the 26th, which is usually the stats they release, we know that all these people were essentially drawn out, right? All the way down to probably about half of these. So the question is, how far down will it go? So Cedric says 493. If they continue, and it depends on how many new people piled in the last 2 weeks, which we know for sure there have been. So I'm kind of aligned with Cedric. I'll be honest. Like, I think 493 makes a lot of sense, especially because we still have to flush. Like, over half of these have been flushed out. I'm gonna maybe take one more great leap and go with 492. So that's what I'm gonna shoot for. So Cedric's going with 493. I'm going with 492. So we will have to see tomorrow. I will release in the live with Alicia. I will release the official acknowledgement depending on what happens here in just a little bit. So there we go. So we will see how that plays out. Wow, isn't it fun to speculate? And so this is Raj actually asking that question from Muscat, Oman. So very, very cool to have you. And as always, guys, post in the comments below where you're listening from and what stage of the process you're at. We love to see who's tuning in, and it really helps us to also tailor the content that we produce on the lives and on our YouTube channel. And I'll just also flip back to the YouTube channel and just show you guys, if you haven't been here, if you're watching on LinkedIn, if you're watching on Facebook, head on over here to the YouTube channel and you will see right tomorrow at 6:30 a.m. Cedric's going to be going live himself, answering questions about immigration, Canada immigration. So you definitely don't want to miss that. And those of you, especially who are skipping out of work to watch this, you'll probably get in less trouble with your employer if you connect in with Cedric early in the morning at 6:30. Okay, and then you can see we also have a bunch of other videos. So I strongly encourage you to check this out. This is a great one Cedric did, how to send a web form to IRCC. And, people think, oh, how hard is this? Seriously. Well, watch this video and you will see that there's more to it than just what you think. Chanel's done one on can students really work 20 plus hours a week? So check that one out. And of course, there's a whole host of other videos, including the main one that I've got up here. That's my, the takeaways from Minister Fraser's report that he issued over a month ago on how they plan to transition temporary residents to permanent residents in Canada. So if you haven't watched that one, go check that one out. So there's the kind of the update of where we're at. And let's see who else we've got tuning in here. We've got some people also guessing. Meet Shaw here says it's going to go down to 490. Hey, anything's possible these days. It all depends on how many they're going to open it up to. If they did a 6,000 draw, possibly. Who knows? Kyria is aligned with Cedric here at 493. Okay, now Meet Shaw's moving. Oh, what is this? You can't have two guesses. He goes from 490 to 492. Seriously. Okay. All right. So we'll see how this plays out. All right. Let's see what else we have here for people tuning in. We've got Lima, who is in Montreal. Good to see you. And then Mario, really starts off our first question, I guess, Cedric. Knox. So when is the tier? When is this kicking in, Cedric? We know it's kicking in November here, and we've done a bunch of blog posts on this topic. So as far as tier, do you remember when it's kicking in?
Yeah, absolutely. So November 16th, it's going to kick in. So if you currently have a profile, you're essentially going to have a week to update your profile before the following draw, which we expect to take place on November 23rd. If you already have received an ITA, this is not going to impact you. And as Mark is showing, we have 5 key takeaways from Alicia, who wrote a nice blog about the implications. But on or after November 16th, you're going to have to update your Express Entry application. And you know what, Mark? I expect there to be thousands of individuals trying to sign into their account over those days. So hopefully everything goes well, nothing crashes. Hopefully it all
Yeah.
works out. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's essentially it.
There's going to be like over 100,000 people that are all trying to get in to make changes. It's interesting when you
Yeah,
look at you look at the numbers, right? So these are all the people that are in the pool. 234,981. Now, less the people that were actually drawn out, but everybody's going to
right.
have to update their profiles. So you can see
Yeah.
it's going to be it's going to create some clogs in the system. So whatever you're doing, you know, make sure you take care of it as quickly as possible because yeah, there's going to be a mad rush to it.
Yeah, no, it's essentially it, right? And I mean, there's 100,000 people with a score under 400. I'm not too sure they're gonna get ITs anytime soon without a PNP. This being said, at least 100,000 people are gonna try to come in and update their profiles. And I think you had pulled it up there for a moment, but there's new occupations that are going to be now eligible for Express Entry. So the most important ones being truck drivers, personal care support assistants. We have also regulatory officers. It's all explained in this blog that I wrote with our colleagues. So do keep that in mind. So you might actually be able to get more points as of November 16th to increase the chances of getting Express Entry draw.
Yes, absolutely. That's one constant with immigration, you guys, is change. That's for sure. All right. Okay, let's jump to a few questions here now. And remember, it's always good. We always love when you put a Q in front of it. So we'll go with Sean Song here. He says, is it legal to create a business in Canada under a study permit or closed work permit to perform work not considered work under ERPR, freelance work paid by foreign client? Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, so
I
I'll touch. Go ahead, Cedric. Yeah,
no, wait. I was just gonna say a very similar question yesterday, Mark. But go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. Well, the reality is, you're saying that this is not considered work. Well, if you're in Canada and you've set up a company in Canada, and it's a foreign client that is retained you to do the work, you have to. It depends on how you've structured it. So when you are generally speaking, yes, doing freelance work for a company outside Canada does not necessarily trigger work. But if you are setting up a Canadian entity and that Canadian entity is doing work and the contracts are between the Canadian entity and the foreign one, that's Canadian work because you are actually working for your Canadian presence, your Canadian entity. So on an open work permit, well, there's no restrictions on that. With study permits, there may not be restrictions in terms of what you're doing, but closed work permits, absolutely. If you're providing work for an entity in Canada and it's a real Canadian entity, then that could also trigger unauthorized work. So it's not quite that simple, Sean.
Yeah. I just wanted to add. There's that page there talking about what is the definition of work under Regulation 2, which tends to be quite popular, and it actually lists two different instances of self employment. So we do have it recognizes that self employment in a competitive economic activity such as opening a dry cleaning shop and fast food, it would be considered work, right? And that would not respect the conditions of your study permit or your closed work permit, right? But then if we continue scrolling down, it does also talk about what's not considered work. So self-employment where the work does not have any real impact on the labor market. So
Mm.
it's really, really important distinction, and the consequences of not respecting the conditions of your study permit or closed work permit could be really big. So definitely reach out to get more details about how to properly structure this. But generally speaking, we're talking about not doing business in Canada, right? Not competing against the labor market, you know, and they're very strict about this. So don't try to, okay, well, what if the money goes to Europe first and then I transfer it to Canada and then pay for my studies? Oh, none of that is acceptable, right? It really has to be like, you're doing accounting services in Italy,
Yeah.
right? Being in euros in your European bank account, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So with all of this, especially this situation, Sean, I've run into issues where people have worked and created businesses and they've been very successful, but in the end, that business is not helping them in any way to get permanent residence in Canada. And self-employed work experience doesn't work for the purposes of the Canadian experience class. And when you're in Canada, even when you're trying to apply through CEC or or one of the PNP programs, generally speaking, it's really employment with a Canadian employer that's driving the ship. And when you own a substantial portion of it, you can expose yourself to being, having it determined to be self-employment, and which has its own challenges. So you want to definitely make sure that you are seeking the proper legal advice for that. Okay, let's hit our first super chat here. So Flavio says, "Hey Mark, thanks for all the support as always." Well, okay, we are very, very welcome. And I always love those comments. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to address yours first, but Flavia here with the super chat definitely jumps up in the scale here, jumps up in the list. So he says, "How long before submitting my EAPR can I get my proof of funds letter from the bank?" So essentially, like, does it become stale dated at a certain point? How early can I get it? What are your thoughts on that, Cedric? What would be best practices for, when you're going to request that letter from the bank, and when it might just, be too old to include with your application?
Yeah, so the completeness check talks about showing the average balance for 6 months for your bank accounts, and the proof of funds is very specific in terms of what you also need to include. So small details like when the bank accounts were opened, the currency of the funds, contact information for the bank. But to speak specifically about your question, it's something that we do see in express entry applications, especially those that have been refused, and then they come to us, is to update with the most recent proof of funds, right? You don't want to have 5 months and a half. You don't want to have 4 months and a half. It can get rejected, and it does, Mark. As you know, I don't need to be telling you this, but Flavio, yeah, no, I would definitely try to update your proof of funds, follow the completeness check requirements, and it's going to have to be 6 months before you complete your EAPR. So you've got your ITA and you're going to submit it next week, that's fine. But if you're going to wait 2 months to submit your express entry application, definitely update your proof of funds as close as possible to when you'll submit your application.
Yes. All right, next question. This is from Among Us. I love that. "Can my parent give me the settlement funds as a gift? Then after a few days or weeks, go to the notary to sign the gift deed, or we have to do these two on the same day?"
Yeah, I think I'm on sus. I'm not sure if you joined me on my live Q&A. If not, I've had this question. There, right? It doesn't have to be one after the other, but it definitely does have to be quite explicit that the money they gave you was a gift deed and it's not a loan, right? It's not something that they expect you to pay back. So it's they can be done a few days apart, a week or two apart, but you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you don't disclose it, you don't have a gift deed, and then you go ahead to submit your application. IRCC is like, wait a second, what are going on with these funds, right? So what I'm trying to say is that you want to do it upfront and get that submitted, and a week or two at the very most. You don't want to make it look like you obtained this gift deed after it started to raise suspicion, right? So it could be a few days apart. It's not the end of the world, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So there we have it.
Okay. Next question. This one's from Sean. He says, and this is kind of a speculative kind of question. He says, "How do you
Ah.
expect the GOP gains in the US would impact Canadian immigration? Would more high skilled applicants frustrated by the US immigration system redirect their attention to Canada?" Well, what are your thoughts on
Send us
that, Cedric?
Send us an email at info@holthelaw.com and we'll set up a consultation with one of our lawyers.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, the GOP gains in the United States. I was just reading on the New York Times um, how the, how it was the Democrats were doing better than expected. But listen, I think Mark, you could probably better answer this question. But from what I've read in the Toronto Star as well, is we have every time when Trump gets elected, or when the United States gets a little bit more volatile in terms of politics,
Yeah.
immigration lawyers, is a big
Yeah.
spike in traffic of how to immigrate to Canada. Have you experienced that, Mark, in the last elections?
Absolutely. Yeah. And when Trump was first elected, I did a podcast with my good friend Betsy Kane in Ottawa on how to move to Canada. And there's always those discussions. In the end, the Americans never move. They just complain. But for individuals who see their pathways to permanent residence, become more limited in the US? Absolutely. H-1Bs are a huge part of my practice, especially when things are tightening up in the US and they're looking for opportunities in other awesome countries, which is often Canada. And so, yeah, there's a direct correlation between what's happening in the US and especially international students and H-1B visa holders in the US looking for, for opportunities after they've already come over and studied in the US for a number of years when their pathways are limited. So very, very common, Cedric, super common. All right, let's get to this one. Anshuman says 10 months from now, and this was a super chat, so thanks, Anshuman. He says 10 months from now, how much will the scores be basically can we expect? So 10 months from now, if we're looking, Cedric, at as we were looking at these scores, and we know that the most recent one was 496, and the next one will absolutely be 493 because that's what Cedric said. So we'll see. So what do you think? Like 10 months from now, let's say in the summer of August or September of 2023, what do you think the world of these draws is going to actually look like?
Yeah, well, we can do some quick maths based on the current draws every 2 weeks, right? So roughly speaking, they're taking 10,000 every 2 weeks. So we're talking about let's just say they're taking 10,000 a month, which there's 26 draws. There's not 24, but in any event, so they're taking 10,000 a month, right? We could go through the 100,000 pretty quick, right? In 10 months. Could it be 400? The answer to that question is no, because as more people come to Canada, as people see their friends leaving, packing their bags, going to Canada with permanent residence, they're saying, "Hey, can I do that as well?" Right? How did you do it? How can I make a profile? And so Mark, it's something that we've discussed, but we do think closer to the 480s, 470s, which was pre-pandemic levels. That's where it was sitting at, right? 2018, we're talking about 450s, 460s. So I think it's still going to be in the like I said, the 480s for quite some time as more and more people apply to come to Canada. The immigration levels plan, right? We're looking at taking 500,000 individuals, obviously through various streams and whatnot, but Express Entry is going to continue to be the flagship immigration program to permanent residents to Canada.
Yes.
So to answer the question, really simply in 10 months, 480, 470, really realistically.
Yeah. Realistically, I think that's probably where it's going to sit. Now, the wild card, as I talk about in my video, TR to PR, top 6 takeaways, the wild card is what, let me just flip back here. I can't pull them up on here. So give me a second, Cedric. I'm just going to go with just me. The wild card is this fellow right here, Minister Fraser, what he's going to do, because he now has powers to alter the draws in whatever fashion he wants and to make them targeted. And so when we have those targeted draws, it blows up the whole concept of the CRS scores considerably. Take, for instance, draw 176 that happened on February the 13th with Minister Mendicino in 2021. When that draw happened, he literally extended it to every single CEC candidate that was in the pool. 27,332, I believe, was the number of invitations issued. Now, could Minister Fraser do that? Yeah, he could. He could say for CEC only, I'm going to cull out everybody once again. Or he could say those with a certain knock code, I'm going to select you. Or those who are holders of a post-grad work permit or have held one within this period of time, also you're within this draw. So there's tremendous flexibility. So when we talk about scores, we have to take that into consideration because come spring, the minister has indicated through his various channels and hinted at the fact that that's when he's going to start looking at that. And if you go back here and you look at my this video, the top 6 takeaways, you will see that once again they discuss at length the importance of specific industries and taking a more industry focused approach and a more labor market needs approach to how they're extending these invitations. So areas where there's occupational shortages, and I actually go through in my video here and at length talking about the various industries that the minister specifically identified in the report. And if the minister identified those industries, then that's something that you want to take a very, very careful look at. And it also makes sense to just remind everybody that the study permit course that I am offering, it's going to be starting in December. And in that course, some of the things that we're going to be talking about are where you should go to school, places to avoid, types of occupations that you should focus on when you are looking to choose a program in Canada. And yes, we know with study permits, the object is not PR, and don't you ever reference that in your study permit application. You know, it's all about getting education, then using it to make a better life for you back in your home country. But the reality is, if you're approaching it like the vast majority of people who do intend to use it as a pathway to permanent residence, you need to be very strategic in how you do it. Heck, with 49% of all students going to Ontario, Cedric, and there's only 6,500 or maybe 7,000. I don't know how many allocations are through the PNP, through the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, but these are all factors that you guys have to pay attention to. So I strongly encourage you to watch this video if you haven't had a chance to do it, the TR to PR top 6 takeaways, because there's some really good insight in there that we just don't have time to talk about in this live Q&A on how to approach things. But Minister has powers, and we'll see how it plays out. All right, next one on our list here says, hi, I applied for Express Entry and I'm waiting the invitation. I currently work for a Canadian institute situated in Ottawa, but I'm working online as a contractor. So is this a Canadian job experience? What do you think, Cedric?
I mean, they conveniently left out where they're located.
Outside. We'll say that they're outside. Yeah, we'll say that they're waiting an invitation. Currently work for Canadian Institute in Ottawa, but I'm working online as a contractor. So, okay, let's approach it from both ways. So we'll say they're outside. Let's say they're outside working online.
No, for sure. Right. So absolutely not. It's not going to work. If you're not working in person in Canada, it's not going to work. It's one of the main requirements of Canadian work experience is to be physically present inside Canada. In fact, you also need to demonstrate that you've obtained the work experience while you had a valid status inside Canada, right? So those are important components. So if you're outside Canada, no, it doesn't count as Canadian work experience. If you're inside Canada, it absolutely does. In terms of the federal skilled worker mark, would it count under the federal skilled workers as being outside Canada for a Canadian company? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, this is an area that we talk about a lot. And I've had a lot of people ask questions about this. So in this case here, he says currently working for a Canadian company as a contractor. And when you're outside of Canada and you're working for a Canadian company, being outside through the federal skilled worker program, that's fine. As far as I'm concerned, there's an argument to be made that work experience is foreign work experience where you're situated. But there has not been a lot of case law, federal case law on this topic. It hasn't been litigated. And so there's a real gray area. Another example, Cedric, is if someone is in Canada and they are on a study permit and they are, they're working for one of the classic examples is like a teaching assistant or a research assistant. And I've had a lot of people come back and say, oh, there's indications online or in this session that I had with government that we can count it. And the problem is that at no point do they actually allow you to do that through the purposes of the Canadian Experience class. But when they're referring to it on the website and they address federal skilled worker, they're always talking about you doing that outside of the country. So there's no issues with working and studying at the same time if you're outside, but inside that can be an issue. So it's an unsettled area, and I don't really have an answer for it, Cedric. I haven't had a client who is willing to take a run at it because at the end of the day, the regulations stipulate what constitutes foreign work experience. There's a defined a definition of foreign work experience, and there's a definition for Canadian work experience. There is no definition for work experience, right? Just flat out. It's either one or the other. So that's the problem that we run into, people who are trying to claim work that they've accumulated in Canada on a study permit for the purposes of the federal skilled worker program, because it only talks about foreign work experience. So we've never had anyone that I've had any dealings with that have taken a run at that and tried to make the argument. Hey, there's always a first, I guess. And if you've heard of someone who's actually done that and been successful, even that I don't trust, because sometimes officers make mistakes. And so I'm very cautious. I'm very conservative when it comes to giving advice on this. I never want to put my client in a position where there's even a possibility that an officer would reject it. So those are some of my thoughts. Great question. That's worth, oh, here, I got my sound turned off here. some late applause here. Late applause. Okay, let's hit another super chat. This one's from Vineet. Vineet says, will there be a pause in draws on November 23rd due to knock code change? So what do you think, Cedric? Are they going to shut down Express Entry and not do a draw on the regular schedule that they've kind of established for themselves?
Yeah, so people have been speculating about this. They've also been speculating about, ATIP disclosures about, the maximum draws that they can take, immigration level plans. We can speculate as well, Mark, but the reality is that, they restarted the draws because there are immigration level plans for 2022 where they need to get a certain number of ITAs out and receive a certain number of PR applications if they want to meet the year's quota, right? So unless there's big technical issues or something else, sure, anything can happen. But Mark, as we've seen, some PNP programs are already stopped to make those changes,
Yep.
right? The knock codes are already available online, right? It seems that everything is prepped and organized. So anything can happen, but I don't think it would be planned just to skip the November 23rd draw. But who knows, right? Yeah. No, we expect it to keep going. That's the short answer to the question.
Yeah. And also when you look back at changes that they've made in the past, there's been a number of changes with the comprehensive ranking score and the criteria. There was a time when individuals that had job offers were given 600 CRS points in the beginning. And they changed that to 50 and 200 respectively. They added siblings, right? They added extra points for French language. They made changes even recently to the questions for study history, where you had to go back and update. And so in each of those situations, they did not shut things down. They did not stop the draws. Things kept going. And within 2 weeks, I would hope that they would have the capability of making those tweaks to the system, before the next draw came up. So I'm kind of on side with Cedric. I don't think, that there would be a need to actually shut things down. But the reality is, as I've learned, anything is possible. Absolutely anything with immigration these days. All right. Okay, here's a good speculative one, Cedric. So how much time is it to process an EAPR? I submitted all my docs today.
So if we can take a look at the official, it's gonna take a few months. At least more than 6 months, probably a year, is an accurate guesstimation, right? We see individuals that submitted before COVID, right, taking up to 24, 25, 27 months for federal skilled workers.
And this is another
being
thing.
said,
This question is so general, Cedric. It's so general. We don't know if it's inside, outside. We don't know if it's PNP. We don't know if it's CEC. Like, there's so many factors. And, even with these, like, we just recently had a client who got theirs done and approved in 6 months. I had one that was approved in 3 months. We pull up for, Canadian experience class, and they're still listing 19 months, which used to be 20. And if we look at the federal skilled worker here and we pull this one up, you can see they still have it listed at 27 months, but I've seen someone who got theirs in 6 months when they were FSW. So it still depends upon the visa office. I wish they were more specific with that. It depends on where it's being processed. It depends upon the volume of applications, a whole bunch of things, right, Cedric?
Yeah, that's exactly it. But I do think that this summer we've seen PR applications within 6 to 12 months. But this is just from our experience, from our practice, right? We work really hard to properly prepare applications, to not have additional document requests, to not have to provide documents many times, right? So we work hard with our clients, and we're really proud about that work that we put in. But generally speaking, we're talking about 6 to 12 months to get your decision. During COVID, if you applied during COVID, you're still looking at 26, 27 months in terms of processing.
Yes. And I'll just pull up Armin, his comment here too. He's kind of outlining the backlogs, and I'm sure he's reading whatever CIC News or whoever's providing this data. Clearly, they're working through the backlogs, and even the processing times that are listed. The one thing that I appreciate from this fine fellow right here, you guys, Minister Fraser, is that in my discussions with him earlier this year, I can't remember if it was February, the beginning of February. When I spoke with him, one of my biggest complaints was that the processing times that they listed on the website right here were not real processing times. Instead, they used their service level standards, the agreements, their mandated processing times that they were expected to hit, even though they weren't hitting them. They were still listing it. It was listed at 6 months, which was completely unhelpful to people. And so even though the processing times are listed at 27 months, it really varies, whether it's FSW or CEC. And so even the processing times you're listing here, Armin, I've had 3 of my last, I don't know. Well, the 3 of the most recent ones all came in way faster than 19 months for CEC. So I'd say probably 6 or 7 or 8 of the last ones all came through less than 19 months. So at least they're under promising and over delivering.
Yeah, and Mark, I just want to mention, a recourse available to you is if your application has been pending, right, for a long period of time, is there is an option to go to the federal court and ask a judge to compel, sort of force IRCC to render a decision on your application. It's called a writ of mandamus. And as you mentioned earlier, I come to the law firm with federal court experience and to develop our federal court practice. So if your application has been seriously delayed, right, you think that it's unreasonable, take a look at our blog on the mandamus. And I just want to highlight that just because the processing times are 27 months and you're still within the processing times, right? They do advertise 6 months for PR processing, right? So something to keep in mind, there might be arguments to be made. If you're over the processing time, definitely reach out. We could definitely talk about how we can do it. And there we go, speak with a lawyer. And then you can find me almost at the very bottom, just on top of Mark. I do telework, so I'm available if you're inside Canada, you can wake up early and do your best for yourself, which is prepare a good immigration application. And if you're abroad, I'm available at better, more convenient times.
Yep,
So there we
absolutely. All right. Okay. Next on our list here, this is Yuli. And Yuli says, hey, Mark and Cedric, do I have to include my bachelor's degree? Sound familiar here, Cedric? We just talked about this. My bachelor's degree in the supporting documents, education, diplomas, degrees of my EAPR, if my ECA report was made with my master's degree only. Thank you. We just talked about that this morning.
Yeah, we just talked about that. So it really comes. So if you take a few steps back, right, you only have to provide the ECA for your highest level of education. So in this case, you only provide your ECA for your master's degree, and your education history, you're only going to put your master's because that's the only degree they're going to get points for, right? So in this case, you'd only provide your diploma and transcript, right, properly translated, uploaded inside. We also recommend that you upload your ECA, right, as well. Upload the ECA, diploma certificates into your supporting documents and read the instructions for the documents, right? If I had a client earlier today, right, they have one ECA, so on the same ECA, the ECA is 2 pages. The first ECA is a diploma, the second ECA is a bachelor's degree, right? In this case, the ECA has both the diploma and the bachelor's, right? Even though the bachelor's is the higher education, the ECA does mention both. So in this case, you provide documents for both the diploma and the bachelor, right? But in your case, you would only provide the documents, the ECA for master's, diploma and transcript for master's, make sure it's properly translated, and off you go.
Absolutely. And I'll also just direct people back here within the Express Entry course, and I think many of you are familiar with it, but this is exactly the kind of things that we cover in here. So I've got modules on completing your profile as well as the EPR, as well as a section specifically on mastering your documents. And within here, I have a section specifically on education, diplomas, and degrees. And you can see each one of these individual lessons has within it, I spent 18 minutes alone just talking about how to compile your education instructions and a whole bunch of other things on what you should include, what you don't need to do, and bonus tips and all of this. So I encourage you guys, actually, if I just flip back here, you'll see when you go to the link below, you'll see there's a bunch of different things that we have coming up. And one of them is the Express Entry. We got the spousal that's coming up here in just a couple weeks. We have our study permit course that's December 12th to the 16th. And then the end of November is our next Express Entry course. And you can go in right now and get access to all of the lessons associated with Express Entry and prepare for the day when the masterclass starts, you're ready with all of your questions. And so go here, check it out. You can see all of the individual lessons. They're all outlined here, so you can see exactly what you're going to get, as well as 4 hours with yours truly here. There's over 10 hours of the on-demand content, plus 4 hours live with me, when we do the next one on November the 28th through December the 1st. So just want to let people know about that. All right, great question, Yuli. Appreciate that very much. Okay, Sravia says, I'm an existing student from January 2022 intake and filed a study permit extension on October the 24th. Am I eligible to work more than 20 hours as per the new rules?
Yeah, so great question. So file the new study permit extension, so you're under maintained status, right? So my question for you would be, did you file it before your current study permit expired? And if you did, you might be under, again, we just provide general information, right? This is not legal advice, but you may be under maintained status. If you're under maintained status, it means that you're allowed to continue with the existing conditions of your previous permit, right? So in this case, your study permit. So the question you need to be asking yourself is, A, are you under maintained status? And B, what were the conditions of your previous study permit, right? Some study permit holders are not allowed to work outside of campus. Some of them are only allowed on campus. Some of them are also allowed outside campus. So what conditions previously applied? And if on your study permit, there was a condition that it was just 20 hours outside campus and you're under maintained status, again, just general information, you may be able to work, but a little bit trickier. So I would recommend you book a consultation because you would not want
Yeah.
to run afoul of your study permit conditions.
Yeah, and this is way more complicated than people really appreciate or realize. So go here, click on book a consult with Cedric, and you guys will get the advice that you need. All right, let's jump in here. Here's another question that we get a lot. So Lima says, I'm planning to move away from Montreal to increase my chances of getting PR. And I do a lot of consultations on that. There are very, very favorable provisions for people that speak French outside of the province of Quebec even. But there's a lot of you that are in Quebec that don't speak French that really see limited opportunities. And if you're living in Quebec and intend to reside in Quebec, you're not eligible for express entry. You need to pursue one of the pathways that are unique to the Quebec immigration programs. But the question here is, do you guys give advice through consultations? And I'm always surprised when people ask that question, because pretty much every time we do a live, I always direct people back. We ring the triangle. We say, go here, book a consult. Even on the main page, when you come to our firm, you can see here, this is all designed and directed to get you guys right here to booking consults with Cedric and getting the advice that you need. So 100% we do this. And he says, what to expect, how to find a job, etc. So this is one of the next levels. So the question is, do you do consults on finding jobs? Well, we don't. We're not recruiters. Like, we're not like labor brokers. But what we do is, when you are applying for positions and you're looking at the possibilities out there, what we do is we help you to actually project through a strategic long-term plan whether or not that job in that province is actually going to give you opportunities for PR. And the advice that we give is always designed to maximize the possibilities, because we don't know what immigration is going to look like, 1 year from now, let alone what it's going to look like tomorrow even. So we help to meet with our clients and talk about which provinces are most effective. And when people have a job offer, that's when we really shine, because that's when we can really look at the job. We can look at what's in existence at that province. And the goal is to give you multiple pathways to permanent residence, so that you're not stuck in a situation where you're waiting for, like, one client I had just this past week was waiting for changes to occur with some of the entrepreneur programs because they had geared themselves towards it. And now the province, and this was an Atlantic province, had not yet made a decision on reopening up a category that would have been ideally situated for him. So he's waiting, working, building, and everything. His whole future is based on that one program opening up. So it's all about strategizing. So right here, Lima, absolutely book a consult. And that's something that we can talk about. Although we don't say we've got this, list of employers that are looking to hire people. We don't do that. But when you do identify an employer and you have an opportunity, we can help you to narrow down the search or to decide if an offer is actually worthwhile for you. And way better to do that than after having worked for a year and then coming to us and we say, hey, that work history just doesn't work, which I also have had consults with that.
And I just want to mention very quickly, Mark, if you do speak French, Lima, you might be able to get a work permit under the Francophone Mobilité program, which encourages French speakers who want to settle outside of Quebec to get a work permit. And it's a very generous work permit. It can be valid for, as long as your passport line can be valid for 5 years if you want. But it does start with a job offer, right? So find a company, find a job offer, but it does not require a labor market impact assessment, which is what hinders a lot of employers from hiring foreign nationals. There's no labor market tests. They give you a job offer. They register it with IRCC. They pay a compliance fee, and they submit an application for your open work permit through Mobilité Francophone. So very advantageous program. I wrote a blog on it on the website, Comment immigrer au Canada. Comment immigrer au Canada si vous êtes francophone. Ou, anyways, there's a blog in French. I forget the exact title, but it does talk about a strategy to get a work permit and then apply to PR if you do speak French. If you don't speak French, no problem. We can definitely still look at various options. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, next question. This is from No Name. Awesome. Hey, Mark, if I create an express entry file with a knock B and also my experience letter, so the reference letter lists that knock B in it, will I have to get another letter when the tier system comes into place? So what's your thoughts on this?
There's no requirement to have knock inside the reference letter, right? So what we're looking at is lead statement and main duties. They don't the job title is not even really relevant, to be honest, right? So my question for you is the knock? Oh, geez, Mark, are you okay? You're doing all right? Yeah, all right.
Yeah, just coughing there. Yeah.
My question for you is the lead statement and the main duties, if this is the same between your previous knock and now the tier system, and if it's the same, that's what they're worried about. So the answer to the question is yes, you can get your knock we can get your reference letter with the knock B right now, right? They can have a knock title in it. It cannot. It doesn't matter, Mark. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So
IDRM is what I use. It doesn't really matter.
doesn't really
Okay.
matter.
Yes. All right. So we got another one from Amongst Us. He says, do single applicants' papers get processed faster because there aren't a lot of papers regarding marriage, kids that need to be checked, or for other reasons? So lots of people ask this. I'll jump in here, Cedric, and I'll point something out. Under no circumstance do you make a decision as to whether or not to include a spouse in your application or children, because your application is going to get processed quicker. It is a nightmare trying to sponsor a family member after you obtain your permanent residence. It is, especially if they're overseas. And yes, if family members are overseas and you're in Canada, the Foreign Visa Office, you're subject to all of those, those situations that exist in high volume visa offices and delays. They exist. But then understanding sponsoring that spouse, if you're a permanent resident and you're in Canada and they're abroad, it can take years and years, and you can't go and live with them while you're sponsoring them as a spouse. You need to be present in Canada. Yes, you can go back to visit, but you can't relocate like you could if you were a Canadian citizen. So that's the one high level thing that I'll point out with that question. But yeah, I've had some people ask me, should I list my spouse as non-accompanying when they're here in Canada with them? Because I somehow think the application might get processed quicker. Under no circumstance would you want to do that ever, let alone the issues of misrepresentation and things like that can sometimes be triggered. So I don't know, Cedric, if you have any other thoughts or anything to add to that one.
Say call Minister Fraser and let him know about these innovative ideas to process applications quicker, right?
Yep.
But no, they all get put together.
Yes. All right. So here's a big question from Dead Gamer here, and this is perfect for you, Cedric. So, hi, my family visitor visa refused on the 14th of October. Again, replied to join convocation ceremony, but the invitation for the same received was very late. The convocation date is near, but no results. Web form raised, no response. What to do next? That's super easy. You click on this. I click on this bell here, and I direct you guys over here. This is in Cedric's wheelhouse. So he can walk you through the process. He can talk to you about the options. Rejected and delayed applications is right in his wheelhouse right here. And then in terms of how to proceed from there, yes, you can even go on our main site. You can see here when it comes to legal help, we've got JR submitting a reconsideration request, writs of mandamus. Yeah, Cedric drives this ship. So I strongly encourage you to book a consult with Cedric. This is in his wheelhouse. All right. Any thoughts, Cedric, initially, other than kind of the high level stuff and booking a consult?
Yeah, I mean, you might reapplying is a valid option in many cases, but if you have multiple refusals for TRVs, you might be looking at going forward with a judicial review, which is arguing in court. You could try a reconsideration, but again, multiple refusals, it might be best to have a federal court judge tell IRCC that, listen, you got to take a look at this more seriously. Here are the mistakes that have been made. Again, very highly case by case dependent, but this is what I focus on: is rejected applications and federal court litigation.
Yep. All right. Next question here. This one is from, let's see here. Joe. Okay, let's go to Joe here. So, hi to you both from Algeria. I got only a request for IMM 5669 after the AOR. Sent it on October the 21st, but no news since that time. Hopefully this is a good thing. Doesn't it? I think, isn't it a good thing? That's what we're looking for. So, yeah, there's a bunch of different pieces moving here, but what are your thoughts on this? Is getting a Schedule A background declaration request, is that a good thing, Cedric?
Yeah, well, I mean, they probably wouldn't be wasting their time if they could just reject your application. Let's just put it that way, right? They wouldn't ask you for additional documents and, new medicals and new forms if they were just going to reject it, right? This being said, they might have some concerns that you did not complete the current forms accurately or missing information, or it could be a case where you're really just updating your application with what have you been doing the last 2 years? Because listen, we've been sitting on your application, right? So it's really hard to tell, but generally when you get an update, more documents, it's a good thing. They want to process your application. If they wanted to reject it, it would have been rejected, right? But listen, everything can happen. But generally, I think it's good news, Mark, that it's being processed. It's been obviously waiting a month or two, but not even a month or two. October, November, it's been waiting 2 weeks,
Yeah.
3 weeks. So I wouldn't even worry about it.
Yeah. You're still in the earliest stages. Okay. Okay. Ashok says, please let me know, when can I claim siblings points in my CRS score after his landing in Canada after Coper? So what do you think?
Listen, I had Ashkov on my live. I think he's asked this question 2 or 3 times, he or she. But listen, we've talked about it, Mark, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. So
Yep.
just take a few steps back. So you can get up to 15 points. You have a sibling that's a PR in Canada, right? And you get your PR when they sign at the border, when they sign that confirmation of permanent residence. But as we saw in my live Q&A, in the completeness check, they actually ask you for a PR card. This is they must provide a PR card. And as we know, it can take 30 or 60 days before you get a PR card. So my advice is wait till you get the PR card, so you have the proper supporting documents. Even if they get their PR when they get the confirmation of permanent residence signed, the completeness check requires it. The second thing is they need to actually have a residential address. You got to sign a lease, right? You can't just put a hotel and that's proof that they live in Canada. They need to have a lease or a hydro bill or a bank account. So probably going to take 30 to 60 days as well. So Ashkov, once again, my advice is I would wait until you get the PR card. Wait until you have the proper supporting documents, like the lease and whatnot, before you claim those points and submit your EAPR. We talked about this already too. There's some risk involved. You can try with the signed confirmation of permanent residence in a hotel address, but it's definitely not the recommended thing because that's not what IRCC is telling us to do. But listen, Mark, I'm curious for your thoughts. What are your thoughts on this?
Yes. Well, that's the reality. Like, anytime you divert from exactly what they're asking for in your application, you open the possibility of them returning an application for being incomplete or reassessing based on, if they feel you haven't sufficiently proven what you've indicated, those extra 15 points, losing them, and then, ultimately having your application rejected. So I just don't like to take any chances. Another example, Cedric, is people who say, well, I can't get the proper bank letter. They won't give it to me. Well, rule number one is do everything in your power to get the letter in the way that IRCC has asked you to get it. And then if not, then you do your very best to provide whatever information you might possibly have to be able to substitute or, give them the equivalent of what they're asking for in a different form. But anytime you divert from exactly what they're asking for, you run the risk of rejection. And, it's interesting, Cedric, because I'm positive that there's probably been some people out there who have submitted an application, have used a hotel, have provided a confirmation of Coper that's signed, when they landed, and got the 15 points. Like, I'm positive you could find people out there. But that doesn't mean that decision that the officer made at that time is going to be accepted by every officer. They've got discretion, and sometimes they use it favorably for people. Sometimes with all the new officers that are being hired, they just make a mistake. Like, they approve something that 95% of the other officers would have rejected. And that's where it really causes problems for Cedric and I, because you guys go online, someone says, well, I got my application approved and I did that. And so then everybody else assumes that that's the way to do it. Well, you have to be so, so careful. And that's why we do our immigration consultations. It's so that we can look at your situation and give you advice that's actually going to set you up and give you the best chance of success. Sometimes you just can't get things, right? And maybe there's reasons why you have to push forward. But the moment you divert from exactly what they're asking for, you expose yourself to risk of rejection. So I'm with you there.
And just very briefly, right? Imagine you're an immigration officer. You have hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of decisions to make. You open an application. Within 10 minutes, you realize, hey, there's no permanent residency card, a hotel address. Close that application, refusal, and don't spend another 2 or 3 hours closely examining, all the other requirements, right? So that's the other thing that we need to look at, is that it's for, in some cases, it's quicker for IRCC to reject applications to get through it, instead of trying to work with you, put your application aside, send you a letter. They don't have to do that, right? You don't meet the requirements. You don't have the supporting documents. The law is very clear that all of this has to be provided when you apply, and so they would reject it. So yeah, there we go. Just we think practically about how it works. We realize that it's easier to make a rejection in some cases for PR applications.
Yes. Now, I definitely want to pull this up. This is super important. So Samson here says, hi, Mark, I might have misheard you. Did you say that any work experience gained by an international student does not count toward Canadian work experience for any PR program? So this is an important part. I did not say across the board that it didn't count for anything. What I said is, and once again, gained by an international student. So work experience that an international student has gained outside of Canada while they're working, while they're studying as well, like study and work together, will always be eligible for the purposes of the Federal Skilled Worker Program. The issue that I have is when you're trying to claim any work experience gained in Canada working for a Canadian company while you are a full-time student. That is the rule. So that when it comes to the Canadian experience class, they do not accept that. But we've known, you guys, that there are other programs, right? That the TR to PR pathway program specifically allowed for that to be accepted. So no, I did not across the board say that it doesn't count for any PR programs. Each program has its own specific rules. And so thank you for bringing this up. And that's why these things, you guys, right here, these immigration consultations are so important, because the short little questions never give us the right amount to actually be able to provide legal advice. And I'm going to reiterate once again that what Cedric and I are talking about today, we are answering questions about immigration generally. This is not specific legal advice that should be taken by any of you as constituting advice that is directed to your unique situation. The consults are so important, you guys, because in that initial 25-minute consult, we can get the information we need to give you proper legal advice that impacts your specific situation. And some of you have also posted, as we wrap up here, and we'll finish off with Samson's with his question here. But the reality is, this here is designed to give general information on immigration and to point people in the right direction and give them access to clarifications on how immigration policy is how it is applied by IRCC. It is not specifically designed to give you guys specific legal advice for your unique circumstances. And if you've asked a specific question, that's probably why it didn't get pulled up today, because those are specifically designed for consultation. So once again, our website here is available. All you have to do is click on the link right here and you can book a consult. Cedric is here waiting. He does a whole bunch of other areas with special emphasis on judicial reviews when things go badly. So that's the situation. All right, guys. Thanks, Cedric, for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Pleasure, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys all for joining in, whether you're watching on LinkedIn, Facebook, through one of the YouTube channels that we have. All of this is available, and watch for more content constantly. Remember, our website is chock full of information, right? Not only do you have access to these live videos and everything that we have over here in YouTube land, and you can see we're constantly producing content to help you, but the blog posts are awesome. And just, you look at the ones that Cedric has put a ton of time into giving you information you need. And after you've gone through here and if you think to yourself, wow, I don't know, is this a possibility for me? Well, you don't have to guess. Just click on speak to a lawyer and talk to Cedric about mandamus or whatever it might be. And we're here to help you. And then the last little final piece is I pull up here on the YouTube channel itself. Those of you who are tuned in, you can see that the study permit course, we're now pre-selling right now, and there's a special rate for that study permit. So if you subscribe to the study permit course right now, if I slide back here, you will see that there's a discount. So $50 discount if you subscribe before December the 1st, and then the master classes will start December 12th. On December the 1st, we will also release the course materials. So they're not available yet, but that's part of the pre-sale. So if you want to subscribe now, you can do that. And like I said, we've got the other courses. The spousal sponsorship is starting November the 21st, but you can access all the material now. And as well, Express Entry is the week after, December the 28th. I think that is the week after, 2 weeks after. Yes, I need a little bit of a break between these lives. So all this is available. And Cedric is working on some new material himself for some new courses. Cedric, share the last little piece, kind of what you're looking at doing here. He's jumping into the game of courses too.
Yeah, so it's under development, so we don't have much details right now. What we do have, oh, my webcam is all blurry. But we are looking to make a course on. You lost me there. The international experience class. So as the new year is coming around, the international experience class quotas for 2023 are starting up again. So we're going to talk all about the various categories for work permits, how to transition to PR, spouses, eligibility, medical exams, police certificates. So that's expected towards the end of the year. And then the second thing we're going to do is actually training for consultants and others who want to learn more and take a course on a rejected application. So we're working on the details. I expect both between the end of the year, but 2 courses, international experience class and rejected applications, coming soon. So there we have it.
All right. Awesome. Okay, guys, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you all again soon.